buzzbuster is back again. Kendrick Lamar has now seen Drake unload 3 albums in a single night, light up Toronto's CN Tower like a comic book mastermind, and fill Iceman with line after line that seemed aimed straight at him. Every jab landed in the same direction. The hype, the streaming totals, the conscious rapper label, the Compton turkey drives, the bot farm chatter. Each reference felt carefully pointed at K-Dot. Yet Kendrick has given the world nothing in return. No post, no story, no mysterious late-night lyric, not even a hint. That quiet is what has everybody on edge. Right now, silence might be the biggest sound in hip-hop. Fans remember exactly what happened the last time Drake pushed this hard and Kendrick stayed out of sight. He let Drake and J. Cole dominate the conversation, stayed patient, and then answered with Euphoria, Meet the Grams, and Not Like Us in rapid succession. Those records didn't just shake up the moment, they changed the entire energy of the culture. Suddenly, Aubrey Graham went from being the biggest name in rap to one of the most relentlessly clowned figures in music. That history is why every move matters now. People everywhere are paying attention, waiting for the smallest sign of what comes next. This isn't just another round of online speculation. It feels like the setup to something much bigger. Drake released Iceman on May 15, 2026, and he had been building toward this moment for a while. For 2 full years, this moment had been building. During that stretch, lawsuit after lawsuit went nowhere. Kendrick picked up 5 Grammys off a diss record aimed at Drake. He also took Not Like Us to the Super Bowl halftime stage, performing it in front of 120 million viewers as the crowd roared the certified pedophile line so loudly it felt like the entire stadium was vibrating.
Meanwhile, Drake said almost nothing. As all of that unfolded, people started talking about his legacy like it already belonged to another era. That silence only raised the stakes. By the time he finally stepped back into the spotlight, the expectation was obvious. This was supposed to be the comeback, the moment where Drake reminded everyone exactly how he dominated the game for 15 years. Instead, the album arrived, and one thing stood out immediately. Across the project, he was still focused on Kendrick. Not once or twice either. The subject kept coming back, over and over. And that says more than any headline possibly could about where this rivalry really sits right now. That is why we need to unpack all of it. We're going line by line through every shot Drake sent on Iceman that appeared to be directed at K-Dot. We're also looking at each angle he used, what it reveals, and what Kendrick's answer to all of this truly looks like. Here's the twist. The response already came. Most people just failed to see it for what it was. Let's get into it. To really understand why Iceman feels so different, you have to rewind the story. Forget 2024 for a second. The real setup starts back in 2011. At that point, Drake and Kendrick Lamar weren't rivals. They were on good terms, moving like allies in the same space. Kendrick was still the rising talent from Compton, fresh off the XXL freshman list. And outside the West Coast, a lot of listeners were only beginning to hear his name. That same year, Drake gave Kendrick a major look on Take Care with Buried Alive interlude. This wasn't a quick guest verse or a shared song where both artists traded bars. Kendrick had the entire interlude to himself on one of the biggest albums of the year. That move said a lot. Drake was already one of the biggest names in music, and Kendrick was the young standout he was helping introduce to a much bigger audience.
For the next couple of years, everything seemed solid. The respect looked mutual. Both artists were seen as elite talents from the same generation, each carving out his own lane while rising at the same time. Everything shifted in 2013, and that's where the real tension begins. Kendrick delivered his now famous verse on Big Sean's Control, and suddenly the energy changed across hip-hop. He called out several rappers by name, including Drake, making it clear he was aiming at them lyrically. It wasn't framed as personal hatred or some messy fallout. It came across as competition, a bold statement that he wanted to out-rap everyone in the conversation. This was never just gossip or artist ego. Kendrick has always moved with a different kind of focus. Every verse sounds like he's chasing something that lasts forever. When he made those comments, he framed them as competition, nothing more. Drake, though, didn't seem to hear it that way. From there, the vibe changed. Something between them clearly cooled, and once that happened, it never really disappeared. For years, Drake would publicly say there was no issue whenever Kendrick's name came up. Yet if you paid attention to the music, the subtle shots kept surfacing. On the surface, everything looked calm. Underneath, the tension never stopped building. Fast forward to 2023, and the situation took a major turn. J. Cole and Drake released First Person Shooter, and Cole made a statement that, looking back now, may have sparked one of rap's longest burning conflicts. He grouped Drake, himself, and Kendrick Lamar together as the big three of this era. Same level, same crown, same throne. Kendrick clearly wasn't interested in sharing that title.
By March 2024, he made his response impossible to miss. Appearing on Future and Metro Boomin's collaborative project, he delivered a verse on Like That that cut straight through the conversation. His message was blunt: forget the big three idea. In his view, there was only one name that mattered, and it was his. That line changed everything. In an instant, the calm was gone, and the fuse was finally burning in plain sight. What almost no one realized at that moment, though, was that Kendrick had already made up his mind. This wasn't going to be some ordinary exchange of diss tracks. Forget a typical rap feud built on attention and headlines. In his eyes, this was a full-scale takedown, a public attempt to erase a rival's reputation in front of everyone. Naturally, Drake answered back. In April 2024, he released Push-Ups, taking shots at Kendrick's height, questioning his writing, and delivering the kind of confident talk people have come to expect from him. Soon after, he escalated things with Tailor-Made Freestyle. That move changed everything. For the track, Drake used AI-created vocals styled after Tupac Shakur and Snoop Dogg to go at Kendrick. It immediately set off backlash. Tupac's estate responded fast and threatened legal action. Their message, put simply, was that using Tupac's voice to attack Kendrick Lamar, an artist who had consistently shown deep respect for Tupac's legacy, only made the situation more offensive. Within days, Drake removed the song. Before the showdown had truly hit its peak, he had already made a mistake that couldn't be easily undone. Still, that was only the beginning. On April 30th, 2024, Kendrick Lamar delivered Euphoria. The track ran 6 minutes and 13 seconds, and every second sounded like it came from someone who had been holding back for a very long time. There was no catchy chorus, no polished melody, no attempt to soften the blow. Kendrick simply rapped, intensely, directly, and without letting up, breaking Drake down piece by piece. Questions about Drake's public identity, his reputation as a culture vulture, and his ties to black culture suddenly exploded online. Critics framed him as a mixed-race artist from Toronto who turned a version of blackness into a product for mass appeal. Social media went into a full meltdown. Still, Kendrick was nowhere near finished. On May 3, 2024, he fired off another shot with 616 in LA. Drake responded the very same day with Family Matters, an 11-minute diss packed with serious personal accusations. He alleged domestic abuse involving Kendrick. He also claimed that Kendrick's longtime creative partner, Dave Free, was the biological father of one of Kendrick's children. Nothing was off-limits. Drake targeted Kendrick's family life, public image, and overall credibility. If listeners had fully believed those claims, the fallout could have been devastating. What happened next changed the entire tone of the battle. Roughly 20 minutes later, Kendrick released Meet the Grams. That was the moment people realized this feud was operating on another level. His answer seemed prepared in advance, as if he had already mapped out Drake's moves before Family Matters even arrived. Every angle appeared covered.
The structure made it even more startling. Instead of speaking directly to Drake, Kendrick framed the track as a message to Drake's family, writing it like a letter addressed to his parents. Within that format, he leveled accusations of sex trafficking and brought up the alleged existence of another hidden child. That detail hit especially hard because Pusha T had already revealed Drake's first secret son, Adonis, years earlier. Back in 2018, Kendrick hinted that there was still more to come. That warning finally landed on May 4th, 2024. Not Like Us arrived with a line nobody could ignore: certified lover boy, certified pedophile. Yet it wasn't just that lyric that hit so hard. The entire record felt engineered for maximum impact. For 4 straight minutes, Kendrick tore through a DJ Mustard production that was impossible to shake. It was sharp, addictive, and built like an anthem. Almost overnight, the track spread far beyond the usual rap audience. Even people who normally never followed hip-hop feuds were pressing play. A huge part of that came from the song's design. It had a memorable hook, a crowd-ready chant, and the kind of energy that felt made for a packed summer festival. For years, Drake had carefully built himself into rap's biggest mainstream force. He was the artist behind major crossover hits, viral records, and songs that could move easily from the streets to top 40 radio. Somehow, Kendrick stepped directly into that lane and outperformed him there too. He didn't just make a diss record, he made one that sounded bigger, catchier, more repeatable, and more radio-friendly than anything Drake had put out during that stretch. Drake answered one last time on May 5th, 2024, with The Heart Part 6. In it, he pushed back on the allegations. He also argued that his camp had intentionally fed Kendrick false details about a second secret child as bait, claiming Kendrick took it. For roughly 48 hours, the internet couldn't decide what to believe. Within hours, Kendrick took Not Like Us to an even bigger moment. The Pop-Out, his headline show at the Kia Forum in Compton. He didn't run through it once and move on. He brought it back again and again, performing the track 6 separate times in a single night. 6. The building was packed, LeBron James was there, and the energy felt like all of Los Angeles had squeezed into one arena. From that point on, the public mood seemed settled. In the eyes of the city, the culture, and eventually the industry itself, Drake had taken the loss. That feeling only grew stronger at the 67th Annual Grammy Awards in February 2025. Not Like Us didn't just show up in major categories, it swept them. The song earned nominations for Record of the Year, Song of the Year, Best Rap Performance, Best Rap Song, and Best Music Video, and it converted every single one. 5 nominations, 5 wins. For a diss record, that outcome was almost unthinkable. Yet there it was. Kendrick Lamar taking Song of the Year with a track aimed at Drake. Only 2 weeks later, the story got even bigger. Kendrick stepped onto the stage at Super Bowl 59 in front of the largest halftime audience ever. Once again, he performed Not Like Us. The stadium crowd shouted along to one of the song's most controversial lines so loudly that viewers could still hear the chant on the broadcast, despite the censoring. Even Serena Williams, long linked to Drake in public rumor, appeared in the moment, adding one more layer to a performance that already felt impossible to ignore. Imagine the backdrop here. A woman Drake had reportedly been involved with ended up on that Super Bowl stage as a dancer. The symbolism was impossible to miss. One writer at Complex basically argued that Kendrick Lamar handed Drake what may have been the most visible and damaging defeat any rapper has ever faced in a rap feud, not just in hip-hop circles either. This played out in front of the entire country, and really, the world.
That was the atmosphere surrounding Drake when Iceman finally arrived. From the Super Bowl in February 2025 to the release of Iceman in May 2026, he was mostly restrained on wax. He did put out a collaborative project with Party Next Door on Valentine's Day 2025, titled Some Sexy Songs for You, yet it didn't feel like a real response. Instead, it came across as Drake stepping back into familiar territory, choosing comfort over confrontation. Earlier, in January 2025, a leaked track called Fighting Irish Freestyle surfaced. On it, he touched on the feud and appeared to send a line at LeBron. Even so, the record landed with very little force. Hip-hop described it as hollow tough talk, and the reaction was muted. It didn't shift the conversation at all. What happened next revealed even more about where Drake's head was after the battle. Also in January 2025, he made a move that said plenty without needing much explanation. He filed a defamation lawsuit against Universal Music Group, the very label he was signed to, over how they handled the promotion of Not Like Us, not Kendrick, Universal. At the center of it all was a claim that UMG had helped amplify a record that painted him in a deeply damaging and false way. His team argued that Lucian Grange, the head of the label, even applauded a Grammy victory for a song they believed had defamed their client. From their perspective, the entire situation looked like a pressure campaign tied to contract talks. That case was thrown out in October 2025. Drake is still fighting the decision through an appeal, but at this stage, the scoreboard in court isn't in his favor. Heading into 2026, the path forward felt obvious. If there was any way to shift the conversation, it had to come through the music. Not just a decent return, not a solid project. He needed a statement piece. The kind of release that reminded people exactly who Drake was before the controversy swallowed the narrative. That was the expectation surrounding Iceman.
To his credit, the
The setup was massive. He rolled out a 4-part live stream event on YouTube to build anticipation. By the 4th episode, things escalated. He previewed lyrics, staged a dramatic on-camera moment where what looked like a bot farm was set ablaze, and appeared to nod to claims that Kendrick's Not Like Us had benefited from inflated streaming numbers. He also hinted at lines that online fans instantly read as direct shots at K-Dot. Then came the twist that sent the internet into overdrive. This wasn't going to be a single album. It was 3 separate projects, all arriving at midnight, totaling 43 songs. Iceman, Maid of Honor, and Habibti. Drake turned the CN Tower into a spectacle, bathing it in light and making the rollout feel massive. Before the album had even arrived, a track leak sent everything into overdrive. The song was called 1 a.m. in Albany, another entry in his timestamp series, and it quickly started circulating online. On that record, he took aim at Kendrick, mocking his height with a Muggsy Bogues comparison. LeBron caught a mention. Dr. Dre did too. Every line felt like Drake was operating in full battle mode, speaking directly to rivals, critics, and anyone paying attention. By that point, the atmosphere was charged and the entire culture was watching for the next move. That next move was Iceman. To really understand what Drake said about Kendrick on Iceman, you have to look at the full picture. The disses were not packed into just one track. He scattered them across several songs, which makes the message more calculated once you line everything up. Only then do you start to see the angle he was pushing.
The opening jab comes on Make Them Pay, where Drake says, "Damn, who is this guy for real? I guess a magician. 100 million streams vanished. No one got questions for?" The magician remark points back to the streaming accusations Drake previously raised in his UMG lawsuit. His argument was that Not Like Us had numbers that were artificially boosted. Now, with the lawsuit dismissed and the spotlight shifting elsewhere, he appears to be suggesting those streams suddenly fell off, without anyone stopping the question why. Kendrick is all over this, and Drake seems determined to twist the conversation. His angle is clear. Cast just enough doubt to make people question whether Kendrick's win was ever as solid as it looked, especially when it comes to impact and numbers. On that same track, Drake adds another layer with, "And now they got a new GOAT, and we gotta test the position." It's an obvious response to Kendrick's Like That moment, where he dismissed the idea of a big 3 and declared, "It's just Big Me." Drake's message here is simple. If Kendrick wants to claim the top spot, he should be ready to prove he belongs there. Another jab lands on Dust, where Drake says, "What was the year you said you had slaps? 'Cause I don't remember it going like that. I don't remember one word of your raps." This one is intentionally petty, almost teasing by design. The implication is that Kendrick's music doesn't really stick unless he's in the middle of a feud, and that outside the diss records, the catalog doesn't leave much of a mark. Of course, that line raised eyebrows fast, especially considering Drake lost a Grammy to one of those very diss tracks. That's exactly why the bar was always likely to get mocked, yet he delivered it anyway.
There's also the recurring height humor. Across multiple songs, Drake keeps going back to that angle, especially with the Muggsy Bogues reference on 1 a.m. in Albany. Muggsy Bogues dunked for once. Even I'm a bit amazed. Someone give the kid a raise. Since Muggsy Bogues is famously the shortest player in NBA history, the comparison is meant as a clear shot at Kendrick's stature. Here, Drake is basically mocking Kendrick's size, sounding almost amazed that someone as small as K-Dot could even score a hit. What makes it stand out even more is that this isn't new for him. He was already leaning on the same height choke back in push-ups in 2024, and the fact that he's circling back to it again 2 years later says a lot about where he keeps looking for ammo. Now to the 4th shot, which might be the most revealing one of all. During the 4th episode of his live stream, Drake teased a line that clearly targeted Kendrick's conscious rapper reputation. The lyric went, "White kids listen to you because they feel some guilt, and that's how your soul get fulfilled. Handing out turkeys on camera inside of your hood, then you go back to the hills." That line wasn't just a random jab. Drake was going straight at Kendrick's public image, questioning whether his activism and community presence are truly genuine. The accusation is pretty clear. Kendrick's audience, in Drake's framing, is driven more by guilty white liberals than by the black community he's often seen as speaking for. On top of that, Drake suggests those film charity moments come off more like image building than sincere connection to Compton. More than a diss, it's a strategic hit at the core of Kendrick's identity. Drake is challenging the very things that define him in the public eye: his credibility, his purpose, and his standing as a cultural voice. This is where the whole thing takes a wild turn. Drake's claim that Kendrick's audience is made up largely of white, guilt-driven liberals may have some truth to it. Still, coming from Drake, it hits differently. He's a biracial Canadian artist whose early image was heavily tied to adopting Black Southern style and energy, so the criticism doesn't carry the impact he seems to expect. Online, people notice that contradiction right away. It's hard to call out someone else's fan base when your own reputation has long been tied to borrowing from other cultures. To a lot of viewers, the logic just falls apart. Another layer comes with the caged owl line. Drake's owl is being presented as something untouchable, alert, and ready to rise. Yet Kendrick had already turned that symbol into a powerful image in the Not Like Us video, where the caged owl clearly suggested Drake being cornered and contained. Now Drake appears to be trying to reverse that meaning, taking the owl back and turning it into a sign of control and liberation. On paper, that sounds smart. In practice, though, it only pulls attention back to Kendrick's visual and reinforces how effective that original message was. Next, there's the line about fighting the machine, not taking legal action against a rapper, from Bees on the Table. Drake seems to be answering criticism over the lawsuit. Many people view the decision to go after UMG instead of Kendrick as a cautious legal strategy rather than a direct hip-hop response, and that choice became part of the conversation fast. He insists the target is the system around Kendrick, not Kendrick himself. Whether that distinction means anything is up to you. One of the more calculated moments shows up in the West Coast jabs on Too Hard for the Radio. Drake jumps on production with a clear West Coast feel, then tells Kendrick that Oakland rocks with him too, almost like he's testing Kendrick's hold over his own backyard. From there, the focus widens.
Next, he takes a direct swipe at Mustard. Drake basically argues that Mustard has been hearing the noise, but hasn't kept pace with the records that really hit, even suggesting there hasn't been a major one since the period when Drake and YG were linking up. It's not just a producer diss. It lands as a shot at Kendrick's entire circle, especially when Mustard played such a major role in making Not Like Us feel impossible to ignore. Looking at the full picture, every line Drake aimed at Kendrick Lamar has now been put under the microscope across 3 albums and 43 songs. That leads to the bigger question everyone seems to be asking right now. Did any of it actually land? From DJ Academics to Joe Budden. And in conversations stretching from Compton to Toronto, the debate keeps growing. Online, the emerging view seems pretty clear. A lot of people think Drake delivered some of his sharpest rapping in years. The Iceman material, in particular, is being praised for its precision, structure, and technical strength. The bars hit harder this time, and the delivery feels far more focused. There's real energy behind the performance, and as a straight rap showcase, it lands well. Still, this arena runs on more than technical skill alone. What matters just as much is the story people believe, and right now, that story heavily favors Kendrick. Look at how everything unfolded. Drake returned after 2 years and released 43 songs. Yet a major portion of the core album still circles back to Kendrick Lamar. The lyrics keep revisiting what happened between them, touching on disappearing streams, butt accusations, the lawsuit, the owl, the height jokes, the West Coast, and even the conscious rap identity. None of that exists in a vacuum. Every callback pulls listeners straight back into a feud the public largely viewed as a loss for Drake.
That's where the problem grows. Usually, the person seen as victorious doesn't keep reliving the fight. The one who continues bringing it up often looks like the one still carrying the damage. That's the impression gaining traction, and it's becoming part of the wider conversation. Meanwhile, Kendrick has stayed almost completely silent. No public response, no official acknowledgement of Iceman before the album, nothing direct to keep the exchange alive. Even when the videos for Not Like Us and Luther briefly disappeared from YouTube for a few hours, they eventually returned, adding another strange moment to an already loaded timeline. One tiny moment sent the entire internet into detective mode. Viewers immediately started arguing over whether it was a deliberate signal or just some random technical slip. Before long, posts were everywhere claiming Kendrick was about to answer with a project called Fireman. For a brief stretch, that rumor felt huge. Excitement spiked fast, fan theories exploded, and people treated it like the next chapter had already been confirmed. Eventually, the Fireman story fell apart and got exposed as completely fake. Still, That says a lot by itself. A rumor that flimsy only spreads that far when the demand is massive. The expectation for Kendrick to answer is so intense that people are literally creating the response on his behalf before anything has even happened. That kind of anticipation means something. It shows influence, it shows control. Without making any public move at all, Kendrick has already left Drake's side watching closely and waiting for whatever may come next. Now here's the part most people are missing. Too many are treating this like a simple contest over who can release the sharper diss track, and that completely ignores the bigger picture. Kendrick Lamar responding to Drake's shot on Iceman likely isn't happening, at least not in the form Drake would want. There's a reason for that.
Listen closely, because this is the key to the whole situation. Kendrick already secured the victory, and he did it so decisively that dropping another diss now could actually reduce the impact of what he already accomplished. Just look at what he managed to do. 5 Grammy wins, a Super Bowl performance. Then came Gia Next, a project that never even had to say Drake's name out loud. It didn't need to. The message was already clear. Kendrick was operating on a completely different level, using the aftermath of that rivalry to showcase his talent, his catalog, and the weight of his legacy. From there, he kept moving. A huge global tour followed, while Drake stayed in the headlines through legal filings, live stream appearances, and album hints. Since the start of 2025, Kendrick's approach has looked deliberate. He's carried himself like that entire situation is finished, sealed, and no longer worth revisiting. That silence may be the sharpest move possible. Drake's current narrative depends on Kendrick stepping back into the ring. If Kendrick answers with another track, the story continues. Suddenly, Drake gets another opening, another cycle, another shot at sharing space in the same conversation as K-Dot. On the other hand, if Kendrick never responds, Drake is left performing into empty air. Picture it clearly. One artist still calling out from center stage, while the other has already exited and moved on. The numbers only make that image harder to ignore. After the feud, Not Like Us turned into one of the biggest rap songs Spotify has ever seen. And Next opened at #1. His tour packed arenas across the world. By every visible measure, the culture made its choice. He didn't get crowned the best rapper alive because people argued about it online. The title started sticking when the numbers, the reviews, and even major industry recognition all hit at once, like everything aligned in a single moment.
Now Drake arrives with Iceman, a project that clearly feels like a reset. It's his response, his public stance, his effort to take control of the story again. Yet the loudest discussion around the album still isn't the music itself. It's Kendrick. Not Drake's sound, not this supposed new chapter, but Kendrick's shadow hanging over the entire release. Even with Drake putting out a new album, the conversation keeps drifting back to what Kendrick did and how Drake seems to be reacting to it. That's the real issue. At that point, you're not shaping the narrative anymore. The narrative is shaping you. To be completely fair, Drake is undeniably gifted. There's no reason to dismiss the catalog he built. Take care, nothing was the same. If you're reading this, it's too late. Views. That stretch from 2010 through 2018 was remarkable. The kind of run that defines an era and places multiple albums in any serious top 10 of a generation discussion. Iceman even has flashes of that version of Drake, the artist who once felt untouchable in his lane. Still, there's an awkward reality the culture can't ignore right now. That line about Kendrick's height? Drake has been going back to that angle since the Pusha T period. And at this stage, it doesn't land like a fresh shot. It feels old. In 2024, a lot was thrown into the conversation. Accusations about streaming bots surfaced, a lawsuit was filed, and that case was later dismissed. Nothing in those claims was ever established in court. As for the criticism aimed at Kendrick's so-called conscious rap appeal, especially coming from Drake, it doesn't really connect. Even the owl mention misses the mark. That symbol is already tied to Kendrick in the larger cultural conversation. When Drake brings it up, he's not weakening it. He's helping keep that image in circulation.
What makes this more striking is that every shot Drake took at Kendrick on Iceman had already been addressed, not through another diss record, but through real-world results. Before that line about nobody caring about Kendrick's raps was even delivered, The Grammys had already pushed back with 5 wins. Questions about cultural relevance were answered on the Super Bowl stage. Doubts about whether Kendrick could move beyond the feud and still deliver strong music were handled by uncertainty over whether audiences were still invested is now being answered by the world tour. So when Drake says 100 million streams disappeared and nobody is asking questions, the response is simple. People are looking at the wins, the awards, and the Super Bowl spotlight. When he says he can't remember a single line, the reality is even louder. Those same lyrics were performed live for 120 million viewers on one of the biggest stages in American entertainment. Bars can challenge a rival. They can't rewrite what already happened. Where does this lead? What comes next? Here's the honest read. If Kendrick answers Iceman, if he releases a track that directly targets Drake's shots, 2 major things happen immediately. First, the battle keeps moving, but now it's playing out on Drake's setup, which gives Iceman a level of importance it hasn't fully earned by itself. Second, Kendrick would be expected to outdo Not Like Us, Euphoria, and Meet the Grams all in one swing. That standard is already there because he created it. If the response lands anywhere below that level, people will frame it as a step down.
On the other hand, if Kendrick says nothing, Drake is left carrying a different problem. His most anticipated album in years, his big return, his "I'm ready" moment, ends up creating less conversation than Kendrick not responding at all. Think about how wild that is. Even the Fireman rumor, which was entirely fictional, stirred up more online attention than a large part of the actual Iceman tracklist. That says a lot. My view, Kendrick may already be responding, just not through a diss record. The response could be the silence itself. It could be the refusal to give the moment any validation. It could be the culture watching Drake circle back to Kendrick again and again across the album, while Kendrick stays still and lets that speak for itself. Sometimes saying nothing creates the loudest message of all. While Drake rolls out his comeback album, Kendrick is likely exactly where he said he'd be after the Super Bowl, either on the road or locked in the studio, focused on one mission: pushing the culture ahead. What makes this even more interesting is that Kendrick's last public message that even touched Drake came through whacked-out murals from Even there, it didn't feel like a direct shot. The focus was bigger than one person. He was speaking on legacy, on where he stands in rap history, and on what that whole clash exposed about the state of the culture. It wasn't framed as a personal attack. It wasn't about settling scores. It was about meaning. That's the mindset of someone who has already finished the story and moved on. Meanwhile, Drake's latest move feels like sending one more message to somebody who has already stopped checking the inbox. Now the real question lands on the audience. Does Kendrick answer Iceman at all, or does he keep quiet and let the culture speak on his behalf? Is Drake making the smart play with this album, or is he stepping further into a situation that only gets harder to escape?
One thing is clear, this discussion is far from finished. People are paying attention. Kendrick is paying attention too. Every extra moment without a response only makes that silence feel heavier and somehow even louder. That's the real story here. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is the time. This story is only beginning, and the momentum is already building fast. Iceman landed just yesterday, which means we're still inside the first 48 hours of this unfolding moment. A response feels inevitable, and when it arrives, you can count on us to cover every angle before anyone else. Hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, keep it right here and stay tuned.